There are differences in shoemakers. There are reasons that shoemakers are better. This is a Chelsea boot from handmade shoemaker Gordon Jimjun. They're located in China, a small artisanal workshop. I'll start off with like a quick disclosure. Like, this is not part of the Chinese handmade shoemaker like review comparison series, simply for the fact that I bought these secondhand from a friend on Instagram. I'll get into that story. But Helen, Acme, Yearn, and Artered in London, they all gifted me those pairs of shoes with the express like purpose of using them for that series. I reached out to Gordon Jimjun. They didn't express any desire to want to participate in that, so I'm not going to include them in that. Just happens to be from a Chinese shoemaker. Gordon Jimjun, it's definitely a name that you should recognize if you're at all like interested in this hobby or in this like community. They are doing great work, and they've had a presence on Instagram, an established website. They are definitely making a name for themselves. Whenever these new shoemakers pop up, it's always a bit of a curiosity where it's like, is it just an aesthetic, or is it just something that like looks good, in a photograph or in a video, or, like how does that translate into real life? So let's start with that. Like, let's look at the website. Let's look at their Instagram, give a little bit of a backstory maybe, and then actually get into some of the details of the shoes here. Now, looking at their Instagram, if you're at all like familiar with their Instagram account, you'll also probably like recognize the fact that Winston, or like Thunder March, one of the more like prolific accounts on Instagram, is a huge like proponent of Gordon Jimjun, which is great. I think whenever you have like reputable names or consumers out there that already have that confidence in the shoemaker, it should instill confidence like in the fact that maybe like they are making quality shoes. So let's just take a look at some of the background about Gordon. So he grew up around shoemaking. He is titled as like their owner and founder, operator, master shoemaker. Prides himself in a handmade, bespoke shoe offering. And when we look at the construction types that they offer, obviously like fully handmade, hand welded, also what they call advanced Goodyear welded. For all intents and purposes, it's like the same thing as like the Argentine welded coming from Antonio Mecariello. They're not gluing anything onto the bottom of the insole. They're kind of carving that hold fast like out of the insole and then Goodyear welding it. Kind of a hybrid of like some of the advantages of hand welting when it comes to having stronger just components and fewer potential failure points, but ultimately it's still a machine constructed shoe. If we look at the Chelsea boot, you can see that there's like a plethora of options here. So they've got the different boot models, but then also the construction types. If you want their fully hand welded instead of the advanced Goodyear welded, it's an extra 400 euros. And then they've got a variety of different last shapes, widths, and then you can also change like the instep. Sometimes you just have to throw that question out, like, are they able to execute all these options really well, or are they not? I'll touch on that later as well. This is an extended height Chelsea boot, so this is an 8-inch tall Chelsea boot. This has a unique pattern. You can see like the way that this side panel pops out. It's definitely a unique pattern. Not necessarily my favorite thing, not necessarily my least favorite thing, but if it were up to me, I would definitely go with like the whole cut Chelsea boot. Much sleeker, more refined, and just a little more like elegant. All right, so this is a UK 7.5 narrow round last with the F width, and there was an increase fit added to the instep. So all those combinations as far as just like the narrow last, the F width, the higher instep, I don't know if they just didn't execute it well or if it was like a miscalculation, but it didn't fit the original owner. So I ended up trading him a pair of boots that I no longer wanted, and I was able to get these. I don't have any shoe bags. I don't have shoe trees. I don't have the box. I just got the boots. That's perfectly cool. They do fit me. I won't say it's like the most comfortable fit, but like it fits, doesn't hurt, and I can wear it. I've enjoyed wearing them the few times that I've worn them. This is obviously a museum calf. The leather quality and just the quality of the components, what I would expect. High quality leather. You can see the break on the grain across like the flex points, as well as the shine that this takes relatively easily. Those are all good signs, things that are reminiscent of high quality components and execution of those materials. When we look at the finishing on the bottom work and on the edge, very, very nice detailed work. Now, this is a machine welded shoe, fudge and finishing, and you can tell that from this edge line that goes around on the welt. That's a sign of like the machine that's actually beveling or finishing the edge. And then also when we go to the waist to the heel breast, that transition is kind of your standard block transition. It doesn't have that notched kind of step off, which is kind of like the key call out of handwork. So looking at the bottom, this is a very narrow fiddleback waist. The indication that I get, and I was able to confirm, is that this provides good arch support for me and good heel support. So that is why I like this. But if you're going for that aesthetic and that's what is important to you, you can definitely see this is a very narrow waist and heel. Overall, like pretty well balanced. I like it. Let me pull out the shoe tree that I have in here. When we look and we get down into the shoe, I'll show a few different angles here. It's got a half sock liner. There's a few things here though that I've noticed that is definitely a little less than, less than great, I guess is one way to say it. Let's start with the heel. The heel cup like comes up and like stops halfway up my heel. Also like the shape of this heel is just, it's kind of like straight. It's got a little bit of a anatomical kind of bump to it, but not really. It's just straight. And when I wear it, while underneath my heel feels good, like back here, I just feel heel counter stopped right in the middle of my heel. It also makes it a little awkward putting it on. You can see it just kind of like collapses into itself. And the overall rigidness of the spine isn't that great. Another detail here is the lining. Like you see how this is split seam right down the back of the spine of that upper. It's not really something that bothers me or that I feel, but you really shouldn't put the seam right there. That's like just kind of begging to have that irritate the wearer's foot. And normally, like in a Chelsea boot, you're not going to see a seam right there. Just for comparison, now this is Acme. This is like a $2,000 boot instead of a $1,000 boot, but just bear with me here. When we look at the rigidness of the spine here, you can see like this is not collapsing. This is supportive. And then you can also see this heel extends up to cover a full heel. It's not going to like cut you off halfway through. Both very good signs. Of course, when we look at the inside of the lining there, we're not seeing a seam splitting your foot in half. Let me take a step back here. So I mentioned a few things, like how is a shoemaker like this able to manage, and can they manage all of these different customizable options, widths, instep heights, widths, lengths, medium round, narrow round, extra narrow round, super narrow round. Like who can do that? Who can do that really well? Because that's the more important question. And then also, like, why is it that I never really had interest, even up until this point? Like, I just did it because, I could get it without kind of losing or risking any money. Like, why don't I have interest in them? If we look through their Instagram page, there are some shoes that just look flawless. The pattern, the last grading, all of these details look very well executed. There are others that just look like way off, completely off, almost like they made all of the adjustments possible to that last, and they didn't adjust the pattern at all. Now, like, I'm not criticizing them to the point where I'm like, hey, don't support them or don't go buy from them if that's what you want. There are differences in shoemakers. There are reasons that shoemakers are better than others, and there are reasons that shoemakers are more expensive than others. These are the details that a less discerning eye is not going to notice. But if you care about what you're spending your money on, you should learn about this stuff, because this is what separates a $1,000 shoe from a $1,500 shoe from a $2,000 shoe. If you spend $1,000 on a shoe, you should not have a seam going down the center of the lining, or a heel counter that cuts off, halfway up your heel. You shouldn't have a leather loophole that you can barely get your finger into. These are just small details that, the shoe's gonna last, but it doesn't follow through the way other shoemakers do at a lesser price, an equal price, and without question at a higher price point. You know, I'm not like disappointed in the shoe, but I'm definitely not like impressed with this shoe the way that I am impressed with Acme, Helen, and Yearn. You can just like look at the objective details and they're different. But definitely stay tuned. I've got Yearn Shoemaker's review coming up in about a week, and then Acme following that, and I'm going to compare all three of those together, really kind of put my final thoughts on the Chinese handmade shoemaker series, and really hope you guys are enjoying that, getting some value out of it, getting more value than you would get out of $1,000 boot with a seam down the middle of the lining. I just had to do it. If you want to check out the review about Helen Shoemaker Blazing Wonders, check out right here. Otherwise, I got the full playlist right here about all the handmade shoes from China. Thanks, guys.